Today, we are going to pull back the curtain on the hidden rules that run our everyday conversations. It's this fascinating idea called discourse, and honestly, it's like the invisible architecture for how we talk and even how we think.
I mean, have you ever really stopped to think about this? Why is it that a chat with your doctor feels so formal, so structured, but catching up with a friend feels completely different, even if you're talking about the exact same thing, like a headache? Well, the answer is that all of our conversations are shaped by these really powerful, invisible forces. It's not just about the words we're using, it's about the entire system those words live inside. It all comes down to understanding discourse. And this is probably the best way to picture it. Every single situation, whether it's a classroom, a business meeting, or even just a text thread, has this kind of unwritten playbook. It guides what we say, how we act, and maybe most importantly, who gets to speak.
Okay, so let's start with the most basic definition to build a foundation here. At its very core, discourse is really just about language doing its thing out in the wild.
So, on one level, discourse is just any string of sentences, spoken or written, that actually stick together to make sense. It's not about single, isolated words, but about how all that connected language comes together to form a whole idea.
And you see this basic kind of discourse literally everywhere, right? What could a heated political debate possibly have in common with a text thread you have with your parents? Or a super dense science article with a quick chat about homework? Well, they're all complete, self-contained units of communication. They're all places where language is working together to create meaning. But, that simple definition doesn't really explain why the doctor's office feels so different from your kitchen table. To get that, we have to go a layer deeper and look at the unwritten rules that are controlling the game. Because really, this idea of just connected sentences is, well, it's just scratching the surface. The real power of discourse is how it quietly goes about shaping our reality, a lot of times without us even realizing it's happening. So this deeper meaning, which was heavily influenced by the philosopher Michel Foucault, sees discourse as a whole system. It's a complete framework with its own shared ideas, its own vocabulary, that basically dictates how we're supposed to talk and even think about a specific topic, whether that's medicine, politics, or anything else. And believe me, these systems are incredibly powerful. First, they set the rules of the game. They define what's considered a valid thing to say, and, this is crucial, who has the authority to say it. And second, they actually help build what we think of as truth. They do this by making certain ideas seem totally normal and natural, while at the same time pushing other ideas way out to the margins. Now, I know this might all sound a little abstract, but once you learn how to spot these systems, you start seeing them absolutely everywhere. Let's look at a few really clear examples. Just look at how these invisible playbooks work. In medicine, words like diagnosis and prescription immediately set up the doctor as the expert. In school, terms like standardized test and GPA define what success is even supposed to look like. Political discourse has its own special language, with things like fiscal policy and voter base. In gender discourse, it uses phrases like boys don't cry to enforce these unwritten social rules about how we're supposed to behave. And this really gets to the heart of it. Language is never neutral. It is actively creating a hierarchy. That medical discourse in the doctor's office automatically gives the doctor the authority, and it positions you as the patient who's there to listen. That's why it feels so different from just having a normal chat. So, getting a handle on these systems isn't just some cool academic exercise. It has real-world consequences, which brings us to the bigger picture and why all of this really matters. Okay, so here's the most important takeaway. When we're operating inside one of these discourses, it can define the world so completely that we don't even see the other ways of thinking that are being left out. The walls of the box we're in become totally invisible. Let's use a really common example, the whole discourse around diet and fitness. First, a set of rules gets established for how we talk about health. Then, specific terms like calorie counting and weight loss become the absolute center of that whole conversation. And what's the result? Well, other equally important ideas like mental health or body positivity or just physical wellness that has nothing to do with weight, they get pushed to the side, ignored, or even treated like they aren't valid. And that, right there, is the real power of understanding this idea. Once you can see the playbook, once you recognize the rules of the game you're in, you can also start to see what, and sometimes who, is being left out entirely. It's an amazing tool for critical thinking. So, I'll leave you with this question to think about. The next time you're in a meeting or a classroom or even just talking with your family, just take a second and listen. What unwritten rules are shaping your conversations?